my father owned a nightclub in, where am I sitting? I'm sitting over here. My father owned a nightclub in, just let me indulge you with this real quick. Owned a nightclub in Maine, and he would say to my brother who ran it, he said, "What's your favorite band here at Gino's?" And my brother would go to answer, and he'd say, and my father would stop him and say, "All of them, all the bands are your favorite at Gino's." So as a journalist, during Oscar season, I'm supposed to say, all of the films are my favorite. Saltburn. Saltburn, period. This is an amazing film, so let's introduce our guests. We have, as the young woman who's got to be careful in the middle of the night, she plays Venetia, Alison Oliver. As the guy, is he really our best friend, or is he going to tattle on us? As Farley, Archie Madekwe. She's an Oscar nominee, a Golden Globe winner, and she's nominated for the fourth time for the Golden Globes this year, this time for Best Drama Actress for Saltburn, as Elspeth, Rosamund Pike. So my first question is about Oliver. Okay. Okay, Farley, I know you're probably probably a bit shrewd about Oliver, but for both of you, he's a Svengali. Okay? Can you talk about that? How do your characters let him in? Because there's this innocence to open your hearts, because he's less than. But at the same time, he's part of your undoing. Can you talk about that? Basically,
we can talk a lot about it.
Yeah.
You have to remember about the British upper classes that, they're not very good at emotion or dealing with their own family. So it's very helpful to have a house guest or an outsider who can come in and deflect attention, particularly for a character like mine, Elspeth. She finds it much easier to engage on a superficial level with a stranger than she does with her own children. I mean, I don't actually think Alison and I share a single exchange in the course of this film. I only talk about her, which is interesting for a maternal figure. And Oliver is a welcome distraction, and we needed one because, frankly, poor dear Pamela was getting a bit tiresome. So, somebody with a, nice peppering of misfortune and, a healthy dose of kind of tragedy following in their wake is perfect. Will definitely pass the summer very nicely in their company.
I think it's people as well who kind of have everything or want for nothing in a lot of ways. They get bored very easily. So, and we see that with poor dear Pamela, like people come to the house and you've heard of a series of strings of different friends of Felix's, and then they're just not interesting anymore and they just get discarded. And so he's just the new thing. And then obviously is different to anyone they've ever had.
And then I think that is Farley's fear, as not being a part of the immediate family. He's not a son, and so he's living in constant fear that he could just be discarded, because he knows exactly what that feeling is. And so that's the initial reluctance with Oliver, is there's probably not room for the both of us, so I've got to push you away. But the thing that draws him in kind of seductively is the power play of, that's the thing that he gets. Whether or not he's really into it is a debate, but yeah, that's what he kind of gets off on.
As far as how does Emerald prep her actors? Like, what type of atmosphere does she create on set? Do you have rehearsal? Does she like spontaneity?
Emerald's an amazing collaborator. She fosters a really trust-based set where, you know, she's not saying she's got all the answers. She's not expecting us to have all the answers. She's just enabling a space for play. She's incredibly enthusiastic, and you know she's been waiting to see these characters come to life. I think she's talked about it. The characters of Saltburn have almost predated the characters in Promising Young Woman. She's been thinking about these characters for years. I think she thought about writing Saltburn as a novel. So, you know, sometimes it would be kind of exhilarating to hear her giggling behind the monitor because she, you know, it's, you know, and then the sound department say, shh, Emerald, but it's, for us, it's really gratifying, you know, because she's so enthused. I would say trust, you know, ability to play, and, you know, very generous as a director. And I've never been on a set where everybody, from the people doing the greens, you know, building the, you know, the plants of the maze, to the best boy, to the fireman who's there to, you know, in case that house goes up in flames, have been on board because it's her vision and that's what they want to support.
She has a really brilliant process in rehearsals as well. She does this thing where you do the read-through, she listens, you then have a few days, or a couple of weeks really, we had to read through the scenes and talk about them. And as you're doing that, she's making notes and she watches what happens in the room, because I think, you know, she knows this because she's a brilliant director, but also a brilliant actor. She knows that actors create something, you know, that is unspoken. So she's watching then what we bring to the text, and then she's rewriting around that. So many key scenes in the film didn't exist in the original script. So like huge scenes that you would have thought always existed, maybe didn't come until days before we shot them.
Give us a name. Give us a name.
Me and Barry in the bedroom. That didn't come until maybe 2 or 3 days. These are all my scenes, but at Farley's return at the Midsummer Night's Dream party.
Or her scenes would, like, they might start in a certain way, but then because that trust is building, they will kind of evolve into something much bolder. But that can kind of only grow out of, or in the way that, you know, we were speaking about this in terms of intimate scenes, she will never just say, you're doing this, or this is, you know, it's how would we feel about, and it's a question, and it's a conversation, and a collaboration. And so a lot of scenes as well started in a way and then progressed through kind of collaborating with her on it and developing that trust. So she's totally, you know, she's obviously written this script, and she's lived with these characters for so long. But, you know, you completely, like, she hands it over to you as well. And everything was constantly like, how much further can we push this, and how much more fun can we have, and what can we get out of this to make it the best version of what it could be. And that's a dream for an actor, and I think that definitely comes from her being an actor, you know, knowing that you want to just give it that further push. And that might not be the one, that might not be the thing that you go with, but just always allowing yourself to, like, go there and make mistakes and be weird, and it's all good because we're just trying to, you know, make it the best it can be.
Can all of you talk more about the improvisation? I mean, well, first of all, when it comes to comedy, you play it straight. You never play for the joke, because you have a lot of funny lines in the movie.
Elspeth takes herself very seriously. She's a very serious person in her own mind. Just a ridiculous one in everybody else's mind. I think Emerald had a lovely way of allowing us to improvise into every scene. You know, so to do the preamble of, you know, the scene that was breakfast, or the scene that was lunch, or, you know, for instance, she knew she needed a kind of entrance segment of dialogue for Oliver to overhear as he enters the family drawing room for the first time. and it's the excruciating thing of hearing oneself talked about. And she didn't write that. She kind of wanted Carey and I to riff on whatever appalling things came into our heads, spurred by Farley feeding us with some story from Oxford that he'd heard about poor Oliver putting his fingers down his mother's throat, or and Carey and I just had to let our imaginations run riot and think of whatever was the most misguided, shallow, naive comment on the less fortunate that we could possibly think of. So
There's like 15 different
Yeah.
versions as well.
They need to release them. There's honestly, I remember being in the other room when that scene was happening, and I was just at the monitor, and everyone was screaming. Like everyone was like literally on the floor, and every single one was completely different. And I remember sometimes Emerald would kind of call out and kind of give little prompts of like,
go again with the dead baby. Babies that come out drunk. Like being in the Upright Citizens Brigade or whatever here in LA, which I would dream of. No, it was lovely, and it allowed us. I think. I don't think I'm the best improviser, but if I can, when I know who the person is who I'm playing, and I think Emerald had given us all such fiercely original characters that you sort of could play because you knew their framework. They with Elspeth, I just had to think what was the most self-centered approach to everything. Just whatever the story was, inject yourself right into the heart of it.
So when I was talking earlier about how he's a Svengali, I was thinking of your scene with Barry where he says you're so effing beautiful. It's like he gets to you. He melts you.
But he gets it wrong, actually.
Okay.
With that, it's interesting because one thing that Oliver does is Oliver knows what each character wants, and he feeds it to them. He gets it right with Venetia. He is kind of constantly kind of doing it to Felix in a way by making him feel like a better person. And with Elspeth, his first gamble is wrong. His first gamble is to think she wants to be considered beautiful or like a sexual object, and she definitely doesn't. She does want to be considered beautiful, but she doesn't want someone to flirt with her. She actually finds that very distasteful. So he tries again, and his second punt is right. She wants to be absolved from the guilt she's feeling about dismissing poor dear Pamela. She wants an excuse to make herself feel better, which is him saying, well, if any of the stories she told were true, I'm sure you saw it. And of course Elspeth had no idea, absolutely thought they were all true. And then she's given this wonderful out by the stranger to make herself feel better. So she says, oh yes, I did, absolutely. So he gets it right. But I think Elspeth is a curious one. There was a scene in the karaoke as well where Farley, because I think Farley is probably the cleverest person in the film.
He gets it wrong with Farley as well.
He gets it wrong, but there was a point where Farley kind of screws with Elspeth, which I don't think we ended up in the final cut.
Oh,
but during the karaoke where he kind of does a sort of lap dance and she's just can't stand it.
She's like almost vomiting the entire time. I was on top of her and like crawling on her, and thank God, to be honest, thank God they cut it, because I had to sing Rent so many times. My voice was...
it was actually amazing. It was amazing.
And then at the end, you want Oliver to stay after Felix dies. And then you say, I'm sorry that you were cast out, out of Saltburn, so I didn't like the way that happened. What was it? What was it in the end with Oliver? With as far as, was he replacing Felix in her life?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I think Elspeth is just clinging to straws at that point, and she's not very intelligent, and she somehow has thought of him as a connection to Felix, yes. And the idea of being left alone with her just her family is is the most frightening thing, because it approaches something like a real feeling, which is something Elspeth has no experience of. You know, the reason why when everybody comes into the maze and she's talking about lunch is because it's not that she doesn't feel, I mean, she's completely grief-stricken and devastated, but she's had to immediately bury it because I think she sees an abyss that would just suck her down like a succubus. So Oliver she's wrong about him, but she sees him as the only thing that's going to keep the family afloat. And then obviously James is way ahead of the game, as was Venetia. And James dismisses him and writes him the fat check, and Elspeth always feels that we still did wrong by a good person.
Alison, tell us about your mom's speech at the end. Approaching it, working with Barry, with your different ways that you delivered it.
I think with that particular scene, like, the writing is just one of the best pieces of writing I'd ever read. And I think with stuff like that, I always find if I just leaning into the language of what she's trying to say and how she's expressing herself is sometimes the key. And I think Barry is such a enigmatic, ambiguous, kind of primal actor in the most extraordinary way. That's definitely in that scene, the way that he looks at Venetia is quite unnerving because she's tapping on what's real. It's, you're not gonna stop, like, you're gonna try get every last bit of us that you can, and you're not gonna leave. And sometimes when I watched that back, like, there's moments where it looks like he's gonna kill her. and so I think there's like huge stakes in that scene, but it's also, I always felt like actually within her family dynamic, she has quieter voice. And I think in that moment, we can see actually she's in line with the audience and how she's kind of observed what this person is and what he's really trying to do and what his kind of quest has been. But it was such a gift to do, and like, Emerald just creates such an incredible space to be able to do those things. And I think that's as well because she's an actor, like, she keeps it so quiet. And I remember there was like not that many people around when we were doing it, and I feel really lucky that I got to say that monologue, because
there was another scene as well. You ever talked about it?
No, I haven't.
There was another amazing scene between Venetia and Oliver, which I guess in the final edit wasn't needed. I mean, there's no doubt it was an incredible scene because I watched it.
I think I can completely understand why it wasn't in.
But it must have helped informed
yes,
that bathtub one in some way.
I think so. Because there was a level of intimacy or a kind of, I suppose, comfort towards Oliver in that scene that then completely shifts by the time she then has that moment with him in the bathtub.
To be the voice of Emerald, though, I do know that she always says she doesn't like talking about the scenes that are gone because they're gone for a reason.
Yeah.
And they're not the film.
Yeah.
Like, and because there's so many things that we brought up in these Q&As, and she's gone, no, it's not the film.
Yeah.
And like, it's gone now. It's so interesting because you shoot them and they're a part of the story for you or a part of the journey, and then the film becomes, in the edit, it becomes a different thing, and then that exists as a separate thing. Just to say that because she's not here.
Archie, can you tell us about a moment with a scene partner where they gave you, it was perfect, but they pulled something out of you that you weren't expecting?
God, I mean, I think really every day working with this cast. Like it was, I can think of two things. I think what Alison just said about Barry is so true. Emerald describes him as having shark eyes, like you can't really read them. You don't really know what he's thinking. And I remember rehearsing that scene where we were on the couch just before karaoke, and you know, that scene and the kind of the things that grew with that relationship kind of came out of the rehearsal of that, just kind of because of space. We were really close together, almost nose to nose, because the couch was so small, and it added this level of, it all suddenly became intimate and sexual and sensual, and this other kind of power dynamic grew from that rehearsal. And at any moment, you just can't read if either of them, but Barry just pushed the scene into another place because I could not read him. And so I didn't know where we were going at any moment. And so it forces you to be so present. And because of that, in that rehearsal process, so many scenes then, and a whole other dynamic kind of grew from that. And then another quick one is just working with Rosamund, and in terms of, and the improv aspect of it. Rosamund, even though she says she's not a great improviser, is someone that I would say does feel comfortable in the knowing the character and doing it, and she will improvise off camera with us quite a lot, just before we enter a scene, before the cameras are rolling, and we then would do that near enough before every scene. We would just start talking as characters and find our way into the scene and find the life of the scene before, and maybe for 10-15 minutes sometimes. And that was something that, you know, created such a bigger life to the film, and you know, and created so much of a wider reality for us, because all these other conversations then happen that, you know, aren't part of the script but really embedded who these people were.
Was that like that for you with Barry, where you're in a scene with him and you don't know where it's going, but you just go along for the ride?
Particularly the last one we shared, where I was in a coma. Very, very vulnerable position. You know, by that time I'd seen the grave and I'd seen the scene with Varley, and I was sort of had the tube down my throat, and I thought, well, Barry, you know, here I am. You know, what you will. And you know, somebody in an interview said, was that you in the bed?
Yeah.
And I said, well, of course,
Yeah.
of course. You know, because you're still an active scene partner to somebody, even if you're in a coma, your energy is still there. And you know, we were saying it was sort of almost like a duologue scene, because you know, the timing of Elspeth going was quite significant, you know, for Barry, I think. You know, and then there was, I remember the moment where he kind of decided to sort of mount the bed, and I thought, oh my gosh, what is about to happen now? And then he got the sheet, and he went with the sheet, and I thought, oh my god, it's going to be my pajamas. And of course, probably it wouldn't be, because we would have had an intimacy coordinator come in before, but it wasn't. But it was that, but he's that electric that you literally don't know what could happen, and you have to be down for it, whatever it is.
I mean, the graveyard is an improvisation.
Yes.
No.
That was not scripted.
No, that was an extended take.
Huh?
Was it one take?
One
Yeah.
take,
Yeah.
yeah. That is
Yeah.
not, that is the,
Yeah.
him crying at the grave, I think, was scripted. What happens
Well, it's
afterwards is not.
So you see what I mean?
Saltburn. Three critics choice award nominations, including Best Picture, 2 Golden Globe nominations for Best Actress Drama, Pike, and Best Actor, Barry Keoghan.
Okay. Thank you.